Welcome. The music that was played as you sat here quietly was Aled Jones and some of Joan's favourite music to listen to. As I said, welcome. My name is Brian Walsh and I'm leading this service today on behalf of the family of Mrs Joan Dorothy West. I thank you for coming to this service today. This service is to commemorate Joan's life and acknowledge her impact and influence on ourselves and the community in general. There are many of you here today that have travelled great distances to be here, and I know your efforts to attend this service, to pay your last respects to Joan and to support her family have been appreciated. I would also like to acknowledge the family and friends that could not physically be here today and are joining this service via live stream. We're here today to acknowledge the passing of Joan and extend our deepest sympathy to all who mourn her death, especially to David, Christine, Robin, Philip, Georgina, Sandra, Amanda and George, who have lost their mother, but to all of you here who have lost a relative or a friend. Thank you for giving us the life of Joan. Today, we do not mourn her death, but celebrate all she achieved and the legacy she has left behind. We will remain forever grateful for being blessed with her presence and the light she shone into so many lives and hearts. We will treasure her and all she stood for, cherishing the memories we have that shall never fade. Today, we remembered our beloved Joan. She leaves us with countless treasured memories that we will hold on to for eternity. We pray that we will be reunited again in heaven one day. Joan accepted people for who they were. The hymn to be played next was chosen by Joan and reflects this. It's called Come As You Are, and I would encourage you to join in and sing along in memory of Joan. As many of you know, but some may not, Joan planned her own funeral. That hymn was chosen by her, and the following reading from the Bible, from John 14, 1-6, was again chosen by Joan. Jesus comforts his disciples. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If that were not so, I would have told you. And I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that you also may be where I am. You know the place to where I am going. And Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. This reading, chosen by Joan, reminds me of her when you put it in a modern interpretation of it. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Really is just saying, trust me. We could certainly trust Joan to keep her word. You could trust Joan to follow through with any task. You could trust Joan to give her best, no matter what the job at hand. I am going to prepare a place for you can be translated to, I will help you wherever I can, even if that meant Joan had to work harder or longer. I am the way, the truth and the light. Translates to, I will lead by example. Joan led by example, whether this was her example of hard work or the ethics she displayed during her life. So John 14, 1-6, in relation to Joan, is just a fancy way of saying, you can trust me. I will help you if I can, and I will lead by example. This sums up Joan and represents her approach to life. But each of us is here today because we have been touched in some way by Joan's life. We share something in common. We know what it's like to experience loss. We know what it feels like to hurt inside. Each of us deals with our grief in our own way. There is no right way to deal with the death of a loved one. There is no time limit placed on how long we grieve. Coming to terms is a solitary, personal experience, but it need not be a journey we make alone. No matter how hard we try to cope on our own, there will be times we need to talk to others. There will be times when we need to know that someone else understands what we're going through. Times when we need the encouragement of a voice behind us, reminding us that what we're feeling is okay, telling us that we are loved, encouraging us so that we can deal with our own emotions. Whether you call in to share a cup of tea or coffee, invite them to an event, or just send a birthday or Christmas card, these acts of friendship will tell those closest to Joan that people still care about them, that they are loved, and it will help them recover from the loss of Joan. I think it's true that we don't get anything for nothing. Everything has its price, and grief is the price we pay for the privilege of love. The memories of Joan you have as a relative or a friend will always be there, and there would be no sorrow in your hearts today if yesterday you had not known the pleasure of Joan's presence in your life. And I will now ask Rebecca Anthony to step forward to expand on what Joan's presence has meant to us.
It is a reflection of Nana's personality that she asked me to write and read her eulogy a number of years before she actually left us. I put this down to her need to feel organised, and perhaps that she wanted to proofread everything that I said about her ahead of time. Either way, the privilege of this is not lost on me. So therefore, I will do my best to provide you with the Joan West approved version of events, which were numerous given her excellent innings. Joan Dorothy Stokes was born in Concord West, New South Wales. She was to be the only daughter of Eileen Dawes, a dressmaker, and William Stokes, who was a British migrant working on the New South Wales Railway. Joan was to be a loving big sister for her lovely brother, Ronald William, who came along almost 3 years later. Joan began life in the family war service home, Gramercy, on Culane Street in Concord West. This was during the Depression and money was tight. However, her family was one of the lucky ones, with her father working 1 week in 3, so they had some money to survive. Joan and Ron both went to hospital at the same time to get their tonsils out when Joan was 5 years old. She remembered this as quite traumatic for her younger brother, herself of course being very brave. While in Concord West, Joan remembers many children that she would play with, including her close friend, Lorna Schwartz. The house had a fabulous garden with plenty of fruit trees, a fernery, and her mother bred canaries. There were often family members staying with them for various hospital visits, or because they were down and out at the time. Joan attended school in Concord West until she was 7, when the family moved to Toongabbie. Joan then attended Girraween Public School, which was halfway between Toongabbie and Pendle Hill. Friends that Joan remembers fondly were Betty Rogers, Pat Green, Norma Hudson, Lois Miller, along with Pat and Gloria Lyons. The girls often rode their bikes, played tennis, and went ballroom dancing. She also remembers playing with the Bueller family and fondly recalls Lorna's singing voice. Eileen Mayberry was the niece of the Bueller family, and it is through a visit to them that friendship with Joan was established, becoming a lifelong bond. The girls often spent holidays together. Joan grew up in a time when children played outside. The milkman would jump the fence with his dipper and pour milk into the billy can on the front step, never spilling a drop. You picked fruit from the trees as a Sunday outing and took peanuts off the ground to fill your basket. A solid upbringing in a family with a strong work ethic found her in her first job weighing the sugar in Mr. Eddie Fitzgerald's grocery shop. This later became a serving position. Joan was paid 10 shillings a week when this became Bell's Lolly and Ice Creamery. The first thing Joan saved for was an iridescent blue Malden Star bike, which she sold for £5 many years later. Joan attended the Parramatta Domestic Science School, which today is named the MacArthur Girls High School, with her group of friends which would later add Mavis Jacobs to the bunch. Here she studied French, Latin, home sciences such as cookery and laundry, typing, bookkeeping, shorthand, art, gymnasium, arithmetic and sport. She wanted to make sure I got all of those in. Joan can remember winning a relay race on the Sydney Cricket Ground for her school. She received a 99% for her final external shorthand exam and says she never used it again once she left school. Joan passed her intermediate certificate at 14 years of age, and because the school leaving age had been lifted to 14 years and 8 months, had to work in the school office until she was legally able to go. She states that she is extremely fond of today's photocopiers, having turned over many a handle on the cylinder tonograph to make copies of notices. Wartime brought blackouts, coupons for clothes, food and identification cards, Joan always wearing the non-compulsory bracelet. She helped out the Red Cross and held dances in the Paddington Town Hall where they invited the service personnel. Joan's family also signed up to billet a number of servicemen during this time. One day, Joan received a note from her brother Ron, who had received it while visiting an army bivouac. Joan wrote to the address, and shortly thereafter George West turned up to visit her while she was working a shift at Bell's. When Joan was finally able to leave school, she got her first job in the office of Morley Johnson's in George Street, Sydney. While her mother dropped her off and picked her up on the first day, after that she was on her own. She worked 6 days a week. In this position, Joan did everything: switchboard, typing, payments, banking, and finally became an assistant accountant. Joan travelled on the train with Betty Rogers, who was selling lingerie made by her sister at a shop near Central Station, and Mavis Jacobs, who worked for an insurance office and then the Apple and Pear Board. They travelled every day together for 5 years. The girls that Joan knew in this time all spent a great deal of time boating on Narrabeen Lake or going to the house of a friend at the surf beach. While George travelled off in the armed services to Papua New Guinea for 3 years, she continued to work. After 5 years working at Morley Johnson's, Joan left to marry George, who had returned and been working building buses while living with her family. Joan and George were married on the 22nd of February 1947 at St John's Church in Parramatta. Their first child, David, was born in 1948. Christine followed 2 years later in 1950. Now some of us might have stopped with 2. Joan even saying she would if she was doing it these days. However, she was to surround herself with family. In 1950, George and Joan moved down to Victoria, where George had obtained a job at the Corrambara Butter Factory. They settled in with George's mother and his alcoholic father for a while in King Street, Corrambara. George and Joan eventually built their own house and christened it with the arrival of Robin in 1951 and later Philip in 1954. George then purchased a farm out at Puwong North with a leaky old house, no electricity or phone. The family moved out there over Easter in 1955. A lot of blood, sweat and tears went into clearing the 92 acres and turning it into a dairy farm, everyone pitching in to help. The house was slowly built up and repaired around them over the years, complete with a flea count on the kitchen wall and a blue-tongued lizard who came in every morning at 5 a.m. to eat the flies around the stove. The remainder of Joan's children were born while living here: Georgina in 1957, Sandra in 1961, Amanda in 1965 and George in 1968. Joan had contributed well to Victoria's population boom. Living in Puwong North, she recalls a bushfire, an earth tremor, a tornado which bent the house inwards and put hay bales up into the trees, along with a snow season to follow, just to test her mettle. During these years, she undertook all of the jobs required of a farmer's wife, helping with the crops, separating milk by hand to send cream to the factory, and giving the skim to the pigs. Eventually, they became one of the first farms in the area to go towards refrigeration. The highlight of the farmer year was the Unigate Suppliers Dinner, obviously bringing up all of the children along with dealing with their associated trials and tribulations kept Joan very busy for a good 40-odd years. With 3 kids left at home, the family moved from Puwong North to Mine Road, Corrambara, where they built a new house. After living here for a few years, Sandra left home and the family spent 12 months caravanning and boating. They then purchased 53 acres at Clancy's Road, Corrambara, which they grazed cattle on and then built another house. Here they spent 16 years, with some time looking after Eileen. Eileen had purchased a Mini while the family was living at Puwong North, and this was handed on to Joan, becoming the first real car of her very own, which she cherished. Eventually, all of the children left home. Joan and George sold Clancy's Road and moved into a smaller residence in Mary Rogers Crescent, Leongatha, where they spent 6 years. When George became ill, Joan moved them both to North Victoria for the agreeable weather and to be closer to friends, along with her eldest son David and his wife Lorraine. George was placed into Urban House and Joan built her new home. After the passing of George in November of 1999, she had a renewed sense of purpose, undertaking a number of community roles. She formed a solid bond with the local community of Cobram. She became a prominent member of the Cobram Uniting Church, enjoying many friendships, regularly attending Sunday service and joining the church guild. Joan was also a contributing member of legacy committees for over 17 years, performing as secretary for 13. Additionally, she spent 10 years attending luncheons, speaking events and monthly meetings for the Vision Impaired Volunteer Group. Joan started to travel more and catch up with people she had not seen for some time. Nana had some great friendships in her life, some of which I had the pleasure to witness, and all of which were common letter writing recipients. She was friends with Mavis Sams and Betty Bryce for over 75 years, catching up with Betty most recently in early 2016. I had the pleasure of going on a wine tour with Betty and Nana in 2008, and they certainly destroyed any preconceptions that these little old ladies didn't know how to have a good time. I fondly remember their tipsy laughter in the back of the car after too much port and sherry tasting. Joan was a generous lady with her time and efforts on behalf of others, be they family, friends, neighbours or people unknown to her. She had endless time for her 8 children, 20 grandchildren and numerous great-grandchildren. Her 2 nephews, Geoffrey and Bruce, were also often in her thoughts. She made time to visit people, calling regularly when she couldn't, and was quite the social butterfly about town. Admittedly, as she grew older, her tolerance for crying and nappy changing did understandably dwindle. However, her love for a road trip and some snacks with friends was endless. Joan got her love of writing from her mother. She kept a diary religiously every day, and these formed reminders of major events in her life as she got older. She also maintained numerous pen pals throughout her life, including Betty Treaton living in Canada, who had been a family friend since childhood. To sum up who Nana was in my life is very challenging. She was a great Nana to me, offering a non-judgmental sounding board when needed. Very proudly attending my university graduation. She picked me up in a variety of ways throughout life's challenges, and for that I would be grateful. My children know her as Grandnan and loved her squishy hugs. She was the one that called my middle daughter Fairy Floss, and this too will be missed. I have memories of being a small child at big tables eating Nana's amazing cooking with what felt like hundreds of people. These are great memories. In my adult years, one of my favourite Christmases was when she finally found me worthy of receiving her cheesecake recipe, although this did get her out of making it for every Christmas since then. We attend funerals and Thanksgiving services with personal reflection already in process, often about our own mortality. If we leave here today aiming to live our lives half as honourably and respectfully as Joan West, then I'm sure that we are on the right track. In saying this, I would personally like to finish this tribute with a poem from Henry Scott Holland, whose words Joan would want us all to consider, remembering, of course, that she pre-proved all content. Death is nothing at all. It does not count. I have only slipped away into the next room. Nothing has happened. Everything remains exactly as it was. I am I, and you are you. And the old life that we lived so fondly together is untouched, unchanged. Whatever we were to each other, that we still are. Call me by the old familiar name. Speak of me in the easy way which you always used. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes that we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without an effort, without the ghost or of a shadow upon it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolute and unbroken continuity. What is death but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well, nothing is hurt, nothing is lost. One brief moment and all will be as it was before. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again.
Thank you, Rebecca. We'll now add to that verbal tribute to Joan with some pictures of her life.
been away, and the years are beginning to show. But you'll always be the angel to me that you were in the sweet long ago. Since I left your tender care, though I've traveled everywhere in this world, I never knew a mother as lovely as you. You are still as sweet to see as you always used to be. God was kind in giving me a mother as lovely as you. You are still as sweet to see as you always used to be. God was kind in giving me a mother as lovely as you. God was kind in giving me a mother as lovely as you.
I love you because you understand, dear, every single thing I try to do. You're always there to lend a helping hand, dear, but most of all I love you 'cause you're you. No matter what the world may say about me, I know your love will always see me through. I love you for the way you never doubt me, but most of all I love you 'cause you're you. I love you because my heart is lighter every time I'm walking by your side. I love you because the future's brighter, the door to happiness you open wide. No matter what the world may say about me, I know your love will always see me through. I love you for 100,000 reasons, but most of all I love you 'cause you're you.
don't think any of us is ever truly ready to say goodbye to a loved one, no matter how it happens. Suddenly, as the result of a single accident, or as it was for Joan, slowly as the result of advancing age and illness. We wish we could have held on to her just a little bit longer. And even when we see death as a friend who brings an end to pain and suffering, there is still something in us that wishes it had all been a bad dream, that Joan had never gotten ill and life could go back to normal. As Joan's family and friends, you'll probably understand what I mean when I say that it's one of life's ironies, that even as we rejoice that Joan will never again suffer the way that those of us who are left behind will suffer, we also long for her, healthy and well, with all her energy back in this life. Our longings leave us tired and aching inside from grief. But you need not feel that way. Although it's true that there was so much more of life that Joan wanted to experience, there was an enormous amount of things she had already done. She had had the love and respect of her family. She enjoyed the company of good friends. She was recognised throughout her working life as a hard-working and talented employee. And she has lived and she has loved for 94 years. Joan has lived an active, contented and productive life, a life that she has willingly shared with all of us here. And we must remember that we're here today, not because Joan has died, but because she has lived, and during her time on earth, she shared her life with us. And although her life has ended, it has been filled with love, laughter, and adventure. So let us pray. Loving God, we thank you that Joan no longer has to suffer pain or fear, grappling with death, fighting for life, and that for Joan all limitations are ended, all weakness is overcome, and death itself is conquered. As Joan passes from our earthly sight, we thank you for the years of Joan's presence among us, and while we feel the pain of the parting, we rejoice in the faith that Joan has gone to be with you. For in your presence is the fullness of joy, at your right hand are pleasures evermore. Bless those who had care of Joan, especially the doctors and nurses and support staff. Guide and support them while they care for others. May they never lose heart in their chosen vocations. Grant that by their vision and courage, we may advance in our own understanding of the world and be better able to help those in need. Gracious God, sustain and support those whose love for Joan was dearest, whose loss is greatest. May they find beyond their tears unclouded visions of your love, and may they see beyond their darkness the clear shining of your light. Set their troubled hearts at rest, banish their fears, and hold them in the comfort of your peace. Amen. And I'll now ask you to join with me as we pray for Joan in the words of the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. It is now time to take our leave of Joan, whom we'll always remember with great warmth and appreciation. We return to our daily lives, resolved to follow her example of courage and sharing, to live our lives more fully with the same integrity and purpose, cheerfulness and love. From the midst of our proud mourning, we leave this service knowing that love is never changed by death, that nothing is ever lost by death, and the end is the harvest of a new beginning. So, dear Lord, help us now to find peace in our own hearts as we remember Joan. Today we lift up in our hearts in gratitude for her life, for all the goodness bestowed upon her during that life, for all that she was to those who loved her, and for everything in her life that reflected your goodness and love. Help us to be confident to release her, to accept her death in the same way we accepted her life. May we rejoice in Joan's life, be thankful that her life touched on ours. Surround us and all that mourn today with your continuing compassion. Do not let grief be without end or overwhelm us, but rather draw us closer together in faith and love. Amen. So Joan, you'll be forever in the memories of all who knew and loved you, and it is with this final goodbye to you that all of us here say, we will remember you until we meet again. I'd ask you all to stand and the casket bearers to step forward as we leave the church to another song that Joan has chosen.